Okay, so last time we talked off air before we did the podcast, uh, it was a really enlightening conversation, Ranga. So, one, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for setting this up.
Yeah, and two, I was really interested in especially kind of the cultural aspect of psychedelics, and you were talking about it from the male perspective
Yeah.
in India versus a guest I had who was talking about it from the female perspective and psychedelic use and stuff. So let's dive in there.
Yes, I did see that we were talking about the podcast that you did with the girl, and Randall had contacted me about this because you were interested in BIPOC, right? And
Hmm.
it's definitely true. What I have perceived is I've had it a bit easier because of how the society is in India is kind of patriarchal, right? And you don't have that much fighting back. So I definitely feel there was resistance because it's still like a major trajectory change given what I was supposed to do, right? And I dropped all of those. Like, I just don't want to do all these things. For example, try to get into a job that is good paying and try to think about how you can settle down and try to get the house, get married, and so on and on. There is this list of steps that were given, but as I said, it's been 3 years of me trying to change the way of my life, and now I feel it's much smoother. So I really don't know how much of the barriers I fought initially, but definitely there it is better for me compared to, at least compared to my partner, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what was the conflict in a sense? So, I think it's good to give some background because you're going to have listeners who are like, I don't really know this culture. I don't understand the patriarchal aspect of it. For that, I think it'd be good to give people some like deeper background about that and why that is so difficult to overcome.
So the patriarchal concept that certain things I've observed back home is the part where um, because men are bringing in money, at least they were, until one generation back, so they get to have the final say in things, right? And these are some of the things that I perceived growing up. It doesn't necessarily need to be true or in effect currently, but what I perceived is uh, it gets you this, oh, I am doing this sort of thing, so I get to decide, like, if I'm not okay with it, then maybe you should reconsider. But if you're not okay with it, then you should still reconsider,
Yeah.
from talking with my counterpart. And one of the examples that I have noticed, like, let's take a topic of marriage, right? Uh, Women take up the last name of man, right? And in Indian traditions that I have seen in marriages, there is this ritual they do where the man walks up the marriage hall and leaves. So it's a very accepted culture that is part of marriages where he says, I'm going to be a sannyasi or a nomad, or I'm just giving up and going. And the girl's father has to kind of beg to make him stay. Oh, please take my daughter.
Oh.
Right. And then there is this whole aspect of dowry concept. Like, the first time I heard that my parents were involved in a dowry system, it was just heartbreaking, right? And but that was the truth of those times. It's and I feel like marriage was one of those sales transaction where it's such a stupid sales transaction. You go to a shop, you pay money, you get the product. I understand, but in marriage, you get the product as well as you get some money, right? Subsidy from the female's house to take care of them, just so you don't. So it's more so that, oh, we'll give you money so that you treat our daughter who's coming into your house in a proper way, right? Things like this. It took me time to understand that I knew I didn't want to do it, but I didn't have the confidence to say no to these aspects, right? So after my psychedelics, the I became confident in speaking what I was truly feeling. Like, it seemed so absurd and stupid to me to do these things. And yeah, the more I convey this to people, I feel like it's just people are we're not confident enough to say what we feel. And the more we keep saying, right, uh, it's just people need to know. People need to have the chance to hear those things and give them space and time to understand. Yeah, it doesn't have to always be, done in a compulsive way. It can also be done in other ways.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for providing that. I think it was very helpful. I like having context. I think
Yeah,
for the listener, they're like, okay, I understand the foundation of this. So you mentioned psychedelics. We're going to talk about that.
yeah.
How did you told me before off air a little bit about this, but I think it'd be good to talk about it again is how did psychedelics transform your ideas about the culture back home and how you wanted to live your life?
Yes, my first psychedelic trip, I would say, was 5 years back in 2017, kind of. And the I would say the problem with that particular trip was that I wasn't aware of what these psychedelics were. So my friend who gave me this, he said it's a laughing drug. So it did end up having that effect. So I just laughed for 3 hours on 2 grams of shrooms, right? And I have no
Yeah.
idea what kind of healing capacities they have and what medicine they are. And it's a state of such beautiful, innocent happiness, which is not tied to things, but since you don't know, you can take back something from this experience, right? So I completely forgot what it was. And then my breakthrough kind of happened with LSD, 150 mcg, and this was in 2018 or 2019, right? And so that I would consider my breakthrough, the first trip that made me think, whoa. Yeah, I was having a hard time to breathe, right? For example, I later found out, few years later, like last year, I found out that asthma was one of a psychosomatic illness, right? Similar to that, even if I didn't have asthma, I had this burden of having to breathe in and breathe out. I mean, I wasn't consciously breathing, but still it felt heavy. And I think on that day of my first LSD trip, I just felt like, whoa, so beautiful to breathe. It's nice. And I was just standing in the balcony and I was just seeing this tree and I was admiring its beauty, right? And the insights that first came to me was I was carrying this baggage, right? Most of the times I didn't have problems apart from the baggage that I carried. It was clear, but to instill that in my life was the integration work, which is an everyday thing for the rest of the life. But that initial big insight that you get, that whoa, so it's my responsibility, right? It could be anyone's blame, but it's our responsibility to fix it. So blame is, I believe, of the past. It doesn't matter who we point fingers to. It doesn't solve anything. But taking a responsibility comes in the present moment, right? So all these ideas of present moment awareness kind of came as an experience, but I neither had the vocabulary nor the confidence nor any of the things that I have right now to integrate it or convey it to people. So this is what I saw. It's magical, it's mystical, right? And after that experience again, I went back to my old habitual pattern, but there was a slight change. I knew I was going to try again with this intent. So it wasn't just a drug I was going to take to, let's say, listen music, or that was part of it. Music has always been part of my
Yeah.
psychedelic experiences, but it's more so with respect to I I needed help, and this is the thing that's helping me, right? It was more as a sign of respect towards the drug, and it wasn't just like, let's say I am a regular cannabis user. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have a ritual going along with it. With respect to, there is a gratitude towards having this drug in my life, but when it comes to psychedelics, there is a bit of preparation that goes along with it, to
Yes.
have the right mindset, which again I had to understand through the experience because I didn't read about these before. I'm sorry, this doesn't tie to cultural aspects yet, but
It's
these
okay.
these were things that just happened in the first trip that made me realize this is a medicine. Okay, I'm gonna have this to help me, right? And after that initial thing, so I'll also give you a little bit more context to where I was in my life. So I was until 21 years old, I was in India. I was living with my parents. I went to a undergrad university which was close to my house, so I was a day scholar. And I got a chance to do an internship and thereafter masters in Canada. right? And when I came to do masters, coming to Canada was a great awakening moment because I was able to see people being interested in diverse backgrounds, right? In India, growing up, I didn't know I had more options than just engineering or doctor,
Right.
right? It
Right.
was so stereotypical. And I did end up doing production engineering, and for my master's, I did mechanical engineering. But in my first year of my master's, I just realized this is not what I wanted to do. And 3 years later, it's amazing that I can say that I just wasted my time because it is a beautiful subject. If I was in a different headspace, I would have done better work at it. But seeing people uh, do pursue different sorts of things made me realize, right, maybe after my masters I'm going to take some time to figure out, right? And but I the problem was I had one more year for masters, and I also couldn't go back to India. Like, I just like the open-minded society of Canada, and I wanted to do anything to stay here. And for that I had to complete my masters.
Yeah.
So that part, the second year of my masters, was very much I knew I wanted to complete, but I didn't have the motivation. So it was very depressing at that point. And once I graduated, I thought, oh, now that I'm done with masters, I'm just gonna like have free time, and I can figure it out. And it got even more depressing because now, at least when I was doing masters, I had this title. Oh, I'm a master's student, so I could tell people that I was doing masters. And then I graduated, I had nothing, so I couldn't tell stories to people, and I was living in a very approval seeking mindset. So I had to say something if people asked me, and that felt very, that hit me like, what am I going to say to people when they ask me? And I was doing gig jobs, I was driving Uber, and at that time I was given this idea that this is not what you're supposed to do. You've got a chance to come do masters, not many people do, and why are you wasting it, right? It's not from a particular person, it's just, it's these I got in a very unspoken way, right? And now there was this 4 or 5 months after masters where it was depressing, and then the psychedelics happened. So that amount of suffering that I had, it was very essential, really essential for me to understand that relatively the peace was within me. And from there on, even though I wasn't peaceful, I knew that that state could be attained within me. And then thereby I started making changes. So I started talking to my parents, which was the first initial thing, that I do not want to work in engineering. Neither I have no idea what I want to do, but I'm fine with it. I drive for Uber and Amazon, and I do gig jobs, whatever pops up. And it might not make me much money for savings, but it keeps me going every day. And one of the fundamental things that I started questioning was, I wasn't too suicidal, but I always considered during the depressing period that, why am I doing this? We wake up, we go to work, we bring in money to buy food and provide shelter for this night, and we wake up and do the same. So what's the point, right? What's the point was the one that was hugely missing. And psychedelic showed me that you don't have to do anything. In a very funny way, it's just said, like, stop doing. For me, what it got to me was, if you're not present while you're doing something, if you're not accepting the situation as it is, it's very disrespectful to the whole process. Things can be still completed, people can get impressed on the outside, but you are not going to be satisfied. So if I wanted to be a couch potato, I accepted it so graciously. So I would work 3 4 days, and if I made more money during those peak hours, right, driving Uber, I would just not do anything for the week because I made enough money to take care of me. And I got a dog at the time, which was part of my awakening journey as well. And as I said, like, it just gave me the confidence to convey these things to first people, my parents initially, because parents are very crucial because they shape your childhood, and you're subconsciously kind of looking for their approval and for their guidance. Even if outright you're dismissing them, you're like, still I want to make them happy, right?
Yeah. How did they take it when you told them that this you didn't want to do the thing that they probably stereotypically thought was what you should be doing?
My mother didn't show much resistance. She just said, you just got this behavior from me. I also have no motivation to do much in life, right? And
Oh.
yeah, my dad blamed my mom, which was a sign of a patriarchal thing. He said,
Yeah.
What son did you raise to be, right?" And
Mm.
my question was always, why do you say, as if it's just, your job was to have sex and then provide, and then rest parenting is just done by one person? Of course not, right? uh, but at that same time, like, my dad was also busy with his work. He was a complete workaholic, right? So he didn't have much time to take and be actually sad about where I am at life. So once in a while we'd have heated discussions. It wasn't too bad. It's just, he'd be completely utterly disappointed, right? So those were barriers for me at that point, because I was taking it in. His disappointment, I would take it in and feel bad about it, rather than understanding that his disappointment is within him, and there is a way that he can change his whole idea around this expectations. Because that's one more thing psychedelics shows me, like, you literally cannot have disappointments if you don't have expectations, right?
Mm.
Like, and why do we have expectations? I mean, we didn't, like, before we were born, we were not signing a contract with God or something, saying that these are the rules and terms and conditions for how I'm going to live my life, so I'm going to expect these things. Now when we, let's say, I've been thinking from how I work at my place. So we have a union and we sign these contracts, and about these breaks and stuff. And you sign these things, they expect certain things out of you, right? You show up at work early, and you take these limited breaks, and I understand. But with respect to life, we have none of those. And subconsciously we start getting this idea of, this is how things should be, right? And especially as a kid growing up, I always thought adults had it figured out. So my first, again, greater insight was, no one has it figured out. We're all trying to make up stuff as we go. So it was liberating. It was freeing, because once you understand that no one knows any idea of what's going on, right? And because we are limited beings, we cannot know things at a global level. For us, our reality is very limited to our senses. Even though technology might make us feel connected, and have this all this information at reach, we're still a five sense being, which we should honor first, which makes liberation much more easier, right? Again, I this is my problem. I drift from that to somewhere.
It's so,
But
no, it's great. It's great.
coming back to my dad, it was the part where slowly I understood that I cannot make him happy. There is literally nothing I can do, because I've seen people, let's say they get married to make their parents happy. The moment it's done, yeah, for maybe 6 months or a year, it's good. And then it's like, one of the things that goes by in India, at least what I've seen in movies and heard, is we're not doing anything. Like, you can, make a kid, we can take care of it. Like, we can take care of it, right? But that's the funny part. Those perceptions changed for me heavily, and it wasn't, I'm not gonna do stuff so that you're less bored with life, right? Again, it's mostly building this confidence to convey what you really want. And I definitely believe we all have the same particular um, search for happiness within us. So everyone, if they just felt this is what it's going to be, and if they conveyed without hurting another person, it makes things much easier. And I've noticed, for example, even my hair, I tried to grow it out in India, but there was a constant ridicule, in the sense that just strangers would ask me, when am I going to get my hair cut? And that used to bother me. I used to sit and think for 2 days, what am I doing? Like, am I right? And after Cyclics, I was free in growing it. And it became kind of like a reminder for me that these could be symbols, like just like how people have meditation beats, or certain things to remind them, oh yeah, I need to watch my breath, I need to meditate, I need to say this mantra to keep my remember, right? This became this part where this is how I'm going to be accepting of myself as natural as I can. And what happened was beautiful over the course of 2 years, because the more people started just seeing me consistently like this, I do not think anyone has any idea of like when am I going to get a haircut, because that's completely eradicated from their mind because they're used to it. And what I learned from that is we just have to tell people the truth and give them space to process it. They will
Mm.
process it. That's the trust part. Like, just give them space, give them honesty. And if we're trying to make our parents happy by doing stuff that we don't want, it's again a disrespect, right? No one is
Mm.
going to be happy at the end of the day, because we all know we are connected at a energy level deeper down, that our state of mind at the deeper level affects other people, and it's not what we portray on the shallow level. I could have a very sober face, or I could have a very smiling face, but doesn't convey that if I'm actually happy or not. And yeah.
It's amazing. I love how you tell these like how you comment on things. It's really you have a piece about yourself. The hair thing really resonated with me. Is like I did not look like this for a very long time. Like this is
Yeah.
like a 5 years ago thing.
Yeah.
And after my psychedelic trip, it was like part of that whole thing. Like, this is how I want to look. This is how I feel natural for me.
Yeah.
And whatever people think of it doesn't matter. It's just how I feel like this is the presence I want to be out there for that.
Yes.
And I felt free to do that. And I wasn't worried about the judgment about it.
Yes.
I was like,
Yeah.
this is just how I want to present myself. Like, and so I let people process that over time, right?
Yes. And you see, more often than not, we are just worried about change. We are not worried about what changes are happening. We are worried about any particular change. If someone says something erratically, and it's like, oh wow, why are you doing this? But if they do it consistently, oh yeah, it's just him. He's just like that, right? And what happens? We just need that space to process the changes happening. And once I started meditating, intellectually understanding what it was about and how to perceive these whole things. And in Buddhism, what the one constant thing is the law of impermanence. So everything is changing, and our problems are because we're trying to not hold on to the thing that is changing. Of course it's going to change. Let's say a particular relationship or particular position, anything is going to change. And right, and we understand that intellectually. Meditation is a practice to experientially understand that change is the only truth, right? And yeah.
It's amazing. So how did your psychedelic journeys influence your ideas about a partnership with someone, a romantic partnership with another person?
It definitely, I would definitely say that psychedelics help both me and my partner at levels I cannot comprehend, that I actually needed help to understand what a relationship is for.
Ooh.
Because again, growing up, okay, let me just, instead of growing up, this is the first thing I did after my initial psychedelic trip. Um, at the time, I was in a relationship with a girl. I did break up, not in a courageous way. It was more of a blunt manner. And I wasn't feeling too bad about it because I was not interested, because there was things that I needed at that point. I'm sorry that I could have done things better, but it was essential that I needed that space to process where I am at, what I actually wanted. So when I went to India that time, this was in 2019, uh, I was just thinking that I'm going to be alone because relationships were not a necessity, right? So when I conveyed this, most responses I got was, but what are you going to do when you're old age? You need to have a partner who's going to take care of you if something happens. That's what life is about, right? What are you going to do in old age? And one of the things in India that I picked up was, we have kids as an insurance policy, as a retirement plan, right? I'm going to have this, I'm going to take care of you so that you can take care of me when I'm old. I understand these things existing, and it could be harmonious. It's just I'm not interested in that viewpoint of life, right? So I understood people's idea of relationship, and that was also present within me, that relationship was again was something that I was going to tick off out of the list of steps that I do to show people that I'm happy, right? That's why the consistent search is there. If you asked me right now, if I broke up with my partner right now, I don't know if I will be able to date again, because so many aspects has changed. There is no chasing, there is no looking out. Things can harmoniously happen, but initially in our ignorant self, we kind of chase things based on how our ideas are formed when we are young, right? And I think over the course of last 3 years with my relationship, I've just explored that it should be so freeing, right? Whatever is mentioned. I used to read the Zen Buddhism idea on detached love, right? I didn't understand it, but with taking psychedelics with the partner and giving that space, and you understand that it's just love is about creating the space where they can be themselves, right? And you have no inch of expectations with respect to that. You shouldn't, right? When it comes to a relationship, as much as it can seem really hard, but the more we keep dropping the expectation, it becomes more purer, and you purify the relationship and it gets better.
Wonderful, man. Again, you have a way about explaining it. I think it to me, it's also funny. Whenever I talk to someone who's had very significant psychedelic journeys, this is how they talk. It's a very peaceful, very straightforward um, communication, and they have a peace about them that is beautiful. I want that peace so badly for so many people. It's like, and I think that's what everybody that's in this space or is an enthusiast for the space wants to genuinely see other people experience that peacefulness and that clarity about their life for that.
100%.
Right, just to
Yes.
like talk, everybody's on the same frequency that I talk to. It's hilarious, actually.
Yes. And yes, you've been connecting with a lot of people on the cyclic space recently, at least what I've seen. And
Yes.
it's so true. It's the part, like when I think about why do I want to do podcast, right? Why did I share my story with Randall? It's about getting this thing out there so that someone who's in the same headspace as me 3 years back gives it a chance. Because I cannot envision my life without psychedelics now. Like that was
Same.
very important. It's crucial. As much as I was born the first time for me to have this experience, I was just sleeping, right?
Mm,
I'm still sleeping on most aspects, but I'm aware of that I'm sleeping, right? So it's
mm.
at least there is a chance to slowly wake up to reality. But psychedelics played this huge role in giving this rebirth.
Yes, I totally agree with that. I think it's it's an educational experience about living and existence. And
100%.
I think that's why it for me it's a very long-term experience. It's like every aspect of my life, different stages of my life, I have these journeys to help teach me about my existence further. It's information. It's so beautiful.
It's
and
beautiful.
and I think that's I want that for people. And I think the biggest mistake in this space that people make is keeping their experiences to themselves and not talking about it. It's like a scientist discovering something and keeping it to themselves, right? And like you have this great thing you discovered, or you write this amazing article and you only talk to people that are in this tiny group about it. And I think it's critical for me. I think I want to talk to as many people as possible about it. I want them to talk to me. Get this out there. Let's destigmatize the
Yes.
expectation that, because a lot of the stigma around psychedelics is an expectation someone said about it in the past. These are
Yes.
bad. These will make you jump out a window. These are just things people made an expectation, or they socialized you into these ideas about it.
Yes.
And the only way to break that is you have to get out there and talk about it. You have to say,
Yes.
hey, here's my experience. Here's how I'm feeling. And even that, just seeing you, feeling your presence, people go, there's something different happening here. This person seems like they're really peaceful. People want peacefulness. They just don't feel like they know how to do it, how to get there. This is a vehicle for that.
It definitely is. It is a great tool for that. And with respect to, so yes, some people will definitely perceive the absolute peaceness which people can carry. but people who genuinely see you relatively make changes. For example, 3 years back, I had no confidence in public speaking, or I
Mm.
wouldn't be able to speak to people, right? I had to do presentations and I would stand behind this podium and my whole legs would be shivering, right? I'm nervous. I'm extremely nervous. And what was the fundamental problem in that was it's just that complete lack of self-confidence. And the thing is that the person who I'm talking to knows better than me. So what have I got to say this, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be true or false, but this particular idea in our head stops us from conveying our perceptions of life. And one more thing, what psychedelics did was I understood that there was no absolute truth to any of the things. We just have perception. As long as we are in this limited reality, in this body, all we will have is perceptions and opinions. And the more people speak out their perceptions, the more harmonious things will be rather than otherwise, right? So, and after that, I just got, it just became, you don't get confidence. You just understand that there was nothing to be not confident about.
Mm.
People, it's like this question. If you ask me, what do you think of your hair? And if I say, no, I don't think it's good, right? Like, I think you shouldn't have this, whatever coloring you've done. And if you say, no, you're wrong to think that. And it's funny. I'm just giving you a weird example because your question was framed in a way that what do you think? So I was being honest in what I think, right? Because once we get that out, we can agree to disagree, and the golden thread goes on. We can continue the conversation, and it's harmonious. You don't carry stuff, you don't say, and we stop playing nice, and we actually become nice.
Mm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
used to put in a lot of effort to try to be nice. I have to be pleasing. The pleasing attribute is not something that we should fake. It is our natural state. Same as compassion is our natural states. In case of something major that's happening, in your neighborhood, like someone is, you forget all your concepts. You kind of help them first, right?
Yeah.
And that's our natural state. And I think psychedelics helps us see that. It removes all the barriers, right? At least for me, it happened in 150 mcg, and my 300 was another big breakthrough. Kind of removed everything. And sometimes it can be frightening because we tend to hold on to the concepts, right? And I don't want to say much from maybe you're going to speak to my partner next week, but she's planning to write this book of how to navigate bad trips, because we have been trying to take this drug under different settings, right? And we tend to see the result is always kind of similar. The message is kind of be here now. And
Yeah.
more times problem happens when we try to resist what an experience is happening, right? So with higher doses of LSD, sometimes this resistance stops. And you see that there is no problem apart from our resistance to that particular situation. And it is true that, again, this reminds me of Ramdas goes, suffering
Mm.
is nothing but resistance to an unpleasant situation, right? And I would have read this 3 years back with no idea. It just goes over my head, right? But experientially, you do it. And it's very essential to read a lot of texts, even though if you don't understand, right? You have these things in your head. Once you experientially do it by yourself, and you're like, this is what he said. And it just seeps through you, right? So the next time you're trying to react to the situation, you're not doing it the conventional way. There is small, small changes, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things they say in meditation is that you're not going to give up anger in one day, but what's going to happen is that you're going to be caught up in it less and less time. The more you practice, right? Whatever I was holding for two days before, right? I might hold it for maybe 30 minutes now, which
Yeah.
is great because I get 1.5, almost 2 days back to my life where I can be present with other things, right? And one funny thing is we haven't talked about, I felt like before my psychedelics, maybe because of my lack of intent or lack of not knowing, I felt like I never had a conversation with people who genuinely asked, are you happy?
Mm.
Is this what you want to be in life, right? Rather, it was like that we are given this idea that something is missing, right? And what psychedelics did for me was nothing was missing. Nothing was missing. Everything is beautiful, right? And Alan Watts' quote I get reminded of very often is like, the gift of life is so beautiful, so magical, and so big that our ego thinks we need to do something to achieve happiness. Just the being of it is enough, right? And the presence of just being, just existing happens in psychedelics.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Yeah, I would extend on that too. Like it made me look at conflict a lot differently. Whereas I think kind of the normal thing about conflict is avoidance of conflict. And it's like, I don't want to deal with this, you know. But I will always like run towards it now. If there's like something, I'm like, oh, you know what? Because this is going to confirm something for me. I'm going to look at this in a positive way. So if I have a discussion or a disagreement, I go, okay, what's the positive element to this conflict? Well, it taught me that I either want to move closer to this thing or I want to move further away from it. Like instead of going, I just don't want to deal with this. Like it's a teaching moment. It's jet fuel for me for something else, a confirmation one way or another. And I was actually trying to teach this to my daughter last night, this concept, and she goes, "This doesn't make sense to me." And I was like, "Of course it doesn't make sense to you because this is how the world operates, generally speaking. But this is to me a higher form of intellectualism." Is
Yeah.
to flip something that is perceived as so horrible and wrong and to find a very positive mechanism inside it for confirmation for something that they see this, hey, if I'm having all this conflict in this situation, to really realize the positive thing is that this probably isn't for me. You know, it's like versus
I
constantly being pulled back into it, you know?
Yeah, and kind of brings back to again how we kind of resist change, right?
Yeah.
I saw this term recently, the fear of finding out.
Mm,
Organizations have it because they don't want to find out what the problem is because change is needed, right? We're again afraid of change. That's all. It's so funny. Change is the only truth, right? It couldn't be overstated. It is
mm,
consistently, things are just changing. It's in constant flux of just motion, right? And when we think about conflicts, right, we have to make changes. Either, let's say, we have to talk about something in a relationship. It's like, oh, this might lead to, let's say, breakup or more fight or more this or more that, or maybe I have to make changes to my life if
right.
she does convince me that I am in the wrong, and so on and on. But essentially, when, as you say, when we confront it head on, and you see, and it's about taking one step at a time,
Yeah.
right? How small can you break that particular thing, and how much can you be present there, and you
Yes.
see that there is no problem apart from just being there and having conversations, like. And a lot, I think, happens because when we tend to think human beings are self-aware, uh, but I don't think we are self-aware. We have the ability to be self-aware, right? So that has to be awakened, right? That's I kind of see the baptism that's happening in churches very significant to this. There is a traditional, kind of similar concept in a cult of a religion that I was born into, right? So, they put this thread around your body and they teach you a mantra and so on. But these are to start practicing it, to remember, to awaken, to be actually
Awaken.
self aware, right?
Yeah.
But until then, because when I ask what I was doing until my age of 23, before my first psychedelic experience, all I can think about was there was no me that I would call me. It was just a bunch of reactive patterns. A fearful kid, growing up in this particular situations, learning this particular set of things from people. And in Indian education system, it's also the concept is you there is no critical thinking, at least not where I studied. It's more you study, you write the answers, and you don't learn stuff. You know stuff,
You know
but
stuff. Yeah.
yeah. So, and one of the funny things that age of information that has changed is that we really don't need to know stuff. Like I don't need to remember stuff. Like I could just, if I were giving you some things about data, right? Like say, there was this thing that happened in 1754, calendar change and so on. I don't have to be precise of this happened at a particular month and so on. I can Google and find out. But what essentially gets me to communicate this has happened through an learning of an experience, right? And we I felt like I essentially missed that aspect of I never learned anything.
Yeah.
I just went through life like I was like a wall. You throw a ball, you can predict the physics of it. Like you can literally predict the physics. Like you throw the ball at this particular angle, it's gonna come this way. If I
Yeah.
bounce it and throw, it's gonna come straight to me. And you become predictable. And it doesn't have to be a bad thing, but at an individual level, you just feel complete lack of freedom, right? You're not in an actual prison. You have the freedom to do things, but you don't have any motivation to do stuff. I didn't
Yeah.
have any bit of motivation to do anything in life. Now I would say I'm the same, but I'm happy about it. Right? So that did change.
I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But I'm happy about it now. Like,
Yeah, you just gotta be. I,
that's
I truly believe whatever the truth that every religion talks about, I just add that as my core thing. Do not do something to someone that you do not want to be done to yourself.
yeah.
And that helps me. That's the only thing I do. And that's the only thing. I'm after that I'm free to almost be whatever I want. Because I did grow up in a way, thanks to how I was raised or the society I was in. Like I didn't have intentions to, morally do something wrong, but it was prisoning for some other reasons, concepts and stuff. But now those are gone.
Yeah.
Now it's so clear. Like when we stop reacting so much, like when you stop being that wall, right? When we stop reacting, our subconscious frees up, right? This is what I perceived from meditation, that when we are not aware, our body is still functioning the same way the heart is beating, the stomach is digesting, our brain is functioning. Oh, I touch fire, I take my hand. If
Yeah.
someone says some insult, I'm going to swear it back at them. I want to have the, or otherwise, I'm going to go and keep thinking and come up with a very smart answer and so on. But when you have self awareness, once you turn to your own self and say to the subconscious that I'm here, you don't need to, do so much of reactive pattern. And I feel that frees up the space in our consciousness. The subconscious becomes conscious now, so you have more room, more space. And I can see when you said that you go into conflicts now, that's just that you have the space and the consciousness to think, oh, I am actually peaceful, I can head to this.
I can
And
handle it. Yeah.
you can handle it, but we need to create that space in our head. This is happening in a dimension that we don't physically perceive, right? We
Right.
don't feel like we have the space. I felt so freer by the day. And the funny thing is that the
Yeah.
better you get at an instrument, right, the more nuantic you get, the more you start learning. It's the paradoxical nature of almost all things. And
Yes.
the more you free yourself in your head, you also find out the subtler things you need to stop reacting to, so you become even more freer.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, I think that encapsulates it. As we kind of wrap up here, what do you see the future of your experiences with psychedelics? How do you feel like you're going to keep incorporating psychedelics into your life as you move on in your life?
uh, in what sense, like with respect to my personal practice or
Yeah,
with
your
respect?
personal practice. How do you feel that psychedelics is going to play an important role in your life as you continue to age?
I think psychedelics, again, this brings me back to Alan Watts. I think if you receive the message, hang up the phone. So the message was quite clear, and it has been clear again and again. And the message was simple: just be here now. There is literally nothing else we can do. Like you just have to be here. So that led me to meditation. So I've started incorporating meditation to my daily practices, and I believe that will be the essential tool that I'll need to transcend my mind. So psychedelics, as much as it can be the thing that opens the door and shows you peace lies within you, it cannot get you there.
Mm.
It can show you that, but you need to do changes every single day. right?
Yeah.
And the more we start doing changes, the more aware we become, the more we can start doing changes. It's just the loop that we form.
Right.
Same the other way it can happen, right? Once we react a little bit, that leads to more reaction.
Yeah.
So the more, once we start with a bit of presence, that leads to more presence.
Right.
And not to say that psychedelics are out of my life, it's still a very essential thing. It just, as the changes are happening in my day-to-day life, and then when there is a trip of like a, let's say 200 mcg, which is
Yeah.
takes you away from your concepts, I kind of tend to see what changes have happened, right? Because in my smaller perspective, everyday life, I cannot say these changes.
Yeah.
These changes are so small, but it gives me the bigger picture of, okay, this is what it is. These are things that I can change about. And yeah, and also just Pink Floyd and psychedelics are something that I don't think I grow older, I'll be hooked onto that. Yes.
Man, I love this. You have such a way of speaking, Ranga. I really appreciate it. And I think you sharing this is going to be very powerful for a lot of people. So, how can people contact you if they want to learn a little bit more about what you're up to or just hear more of you?
Yeah, I'm there on LinkedIn. Like I browse it every day, so I'm up for chats, connections, anything. I do have another
Beautiful.
podcast with George Monty from True Life. We do
Awesome.
have interesting conversations about almost the same thing, and it's nice to get this out there because, as I say, I can not repeat it enough that giving this conversation out there to a person who might be in the similar headspace as I was, because I needed that for what books for me at that point. Alan Watts, Ram Dass, Eckhart Tolle,
Yeah.
these people were crucial to give me that space to stay on this path, because I know many people have taken psychedelics who have went back to conventional ways saying that it's just an hallucinogen, so it's not the truth, right?
Mm,
Truth is about here. It's about this concept. It's about getting married, having kids. I'm not saying, again, I'm not against it. It just doesn't have to be the way of life for everyone. And if
right.
someone realizes that I don't feel like I want to do this, right? And this conversation can give them space to process themselves. You know,
Yes.
I found this other thing which I would like to say before we end. Uh, the doctor's job uh, is to keep the patient entertained or be happy while the medicine does its work, right? Same with psychedelics. We just create the space. Same with any kind of conversation. The work happens by the individual themselves. What we we essentially do for people is all, it comes back to relationships as well. Just give the space to people for them to express who they truly are.
Yes. I love that. Thank you so much for your time,
Thank
Ranga.
you.
Seriously, seem like such a wonderful person. And I can't wait to talk to your partner too
Yeah,
soon. I think it's going
yeah,
to be
I'm
very
looking forward to
enlightening as
that
well.
too.
You got to
Yeah,
listen to it when it comes out.
yes, definitely.
Thank you so much, man. I'll be in touch with you. Okay.
Thank you so much. Bye.